In the beginning, there was nothing.
Somehow, out of this nothing came everything.
Out of this vibrant nothingness, matter, energy, space, time, consciousness, mind emerged, came out.
How is it that something as unconscious as the matter of the brain can ever give rise to something as immaterial as an experience?
If you want to see fear in a quantum physicist's eyes, just mention the words, the measurement problem. The measurement problem is this: an atom only appears in a particular place if you measure it. In other words, an atom is spread out all over the place until a conscious observer decides to look at it. So the act of measurement or observation creates the entire universe.
Only conscious beings can be observers, then we're intimately hooked into the very existence of reality. Without us, there would just be this expanding superposition of possibilities with nothing definite ever actually happening.
Out of millions and millions of blobs of energy and light, photons and electrons, they make up this imaginary three-dimensional solid world, which doesn't exist at all according to relativity or quantum mechanics.
Anytime we attempt to look at particles beyond a certain level, the very act of observation changes things.
And in addition, the more you look at individual particles, the more you realize that there is no such thing as one electron. An electron, or any elementary particle, exists only in relationship to other things, like other particles or the universe at large. This means that deeply enough, and you dive down into the nature of matter, everything we know about the everyday world dissolves. There are no objects anymore. There are only relationships. There's no locality anymore. There's no time anymore. The more you look at something in detail, in what we think of as solid matter, the less and less solid it begins to look.
The only realities we know are the ones our brain manufactures. Our brain receives millions of signals every minute, and we organize them into holograms, which we project outside ourselves and call reality.
Well, if the brain cortex, if it is also a hologram, then it's a three-dimensional hologram. If two-dimensional holograms reconstruct three-dimensional images, then, ergo, it follows that three-dimensional holograms reconstruct four-dimensional images.
A hologram is a metaphor. It is how you take n dimensions of information and you bring them down into n-1 dimensions. It's a way of relating the paradoxes that we find in how to make a leap from this concept to that concept.
The conceptual pigeonholes we use, words, to describe reality, are phenomena inside our head. They're not out there. And most of the time this is a philosophical quibble, but when you get down to quantum physics, and this is one of the reasons that Bohm came up with the holographic idea, it starts to have real effects. And one of those is it's been discovered that if you take two subatomic particles like electrons, and in certain instances, when you do something to one, it will always affect the other, no matter how far apart they are.
Well, how can this be? But what this tells us is that once matter is physically joined, even when it becomes separate, the energy is still there that's connecting it. And this is why it's important to me, because if we go back far enough in time, all the particles of matter of this entire universe that are expanding were all meshed together in a single particle about the size of a green pea, is what scientists tell us today, is what the computer models suggest. That if you could go into the universe today and take all the particles of matter and take out all the space in between and bring it together and compress it into a size of a single green pea, it means that you and me and every one of our listeners, we were all once part of that same particle that creates this whole universe today. And even though those particles are now separate and expanding, and studies show that they are, energetically we're all still linked.
So an atom and its electron are multiversal objects. And that multiversal object is what the quantum mechanics is describing. Now, that means that the parallel universe aspect of reality as described by quantum theory must apply to objects of all sizes: humans, stars, galaxies, everything. And that's why we call it the parallel universe theory rather than just parallel electrons theory.
Because we ourselves are made of atoms after all.
We are, that's right. And the same theory that says that the atoms exist in more than one place in different universes says that we humans also exist in more than one place and in more than one state of mind and so forth in different universes.
And so what that means, talking about words, is that there is no separation between electrons. Furthermore, there's no separation between people.
Everything is interconnected, and the biggest secret of all, to me, is the extent to which individuality is an illusion.
Illusion comes from how our minds perceive.
My illusion comes from my mind, your illusion comes from your mind. You do not need to search
anywhere else for the source of illusion. Wherever we search externally, we cannot find the source of illusion because your illusions come from within your mind.
The big thing we're talking about here is a new way of thinking about this thing we call the person, the self, the beingness, the I. And as we begin to modify what we mean by that, we could begin to see and touch upon this infinite realm that I'm speaking about.
Infinities are part of the boundary of your existence. That is, viewed from this perspective, everything can be divided to infinity.
If you've ever wondered why nuclear power is 1,000,000 times more powerful than chemical energy, it's because chemical energy results from the manipulation of atoms in a molecule. Nuclear energy results from the manipulation of nucleons in a nucleus. The superunified scale, 1,000, million times smaller, is virtually infinite in its dynamism.
If you're seeking the infinite, what instruments do you have to seek the infinite? Only sense organs, isn't it? So through your sense organs, if you're seeking the infinite, it is like wanting to go to moon with a bullock cart. Isn't it so? That is the plight of humanity right now. With a limited perception, they're trying to grasp that which is beyond.
So we try to perceive at the ultimate level of reality, and we search for any kind of method. For example, new technology, atomic power, etc. But search as we might, we cannot perceive the ultimate level of reality using these mechanisms. The ultimate level of reality is fundamentally empty and not observable using these scientific methods.
Science is involved in a perceptual enterprise, not primarily in gaining knowledge, though knowledge appears, but knowledge is a byproduct. And by understanding the thing, you can coherently run our contact with it as long as it is coherent. It shows that our understanding is correct. You see, we must distinguish between correct appearances and incorrect appearances or illusory.
Your appearance now is what we call residual self-image. It is the mental projection of your digital self. This isn't real. What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
Our brains take information in and sometimes give it a form. It's not that the picture is out there, it's that we're getting data that we're turning into a picture according to our own belief systems and our own unconscious belief systems as well.
We know what is going on is that light comes in through the eyes, hits the back of the retina, triggers electrochemical impulses which travel down nerve fibers to the back of the brain, where the brain very cleverly, in about 1/10 of a second, puts it all together and says, this is what it looks like out there.
Well, you're creating your own reality tunnel. That doesn't mean you're creating reality. Out of reality, whatever that is, out of the infinite flux of energy, you're creating your own reality tunnel, and most people aren't aware of it. Most people aren't aware of it.
All matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration. That we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There is no such thing as death. Life is only a dream. And We are the imagination of ourselves.
So the relationship between the organism and the environment is transactional. The environment grows the organism, and in turn the organism creates the environment. The organism turns the sun into light, but it requires there to be an environment containing a sun for there to be an organism at all. And the answer to it is simply they're all one process. It isn't that organisms by chance came into this world. Put it rather that this world is the sort of environment which grows organisms. It was that way from the beginning. Just in the same way, the organisms may, in time, have arrived in the scene or out of the scene later than the beginning of the scene. But from the moment it went bang in the beginning, that's the way it started. Organisms like us sitting here, were involved in it. You see, look here, let's take the propagation of an electric current. Although in the development of any physical system, there may be billions of years between the creation of the most primitive form of energy and then the arrival of intelligent life. That billions of years is just the same thing as the trip of the current round the wire. It takes a little time. But it's already implied. It takes time for an acorn to turn into an oak. But the oak is already implied in the acorn. So in any lump of rock floating about in space, there is implicit human intelligence. Sometime, somehow, somewhere. They all go together. So don't differentiate yourself and stand off against this and say, I am a living organism in a world made of a lot of dead junk, rocks and stuff. It all goes together. Those rocks are just as much you as your fingernails. You need rocks. What are you going to stand on? Our common sense has been rigged, you see, so that we feel strangers and aliens in this world. And this is terribly plausible. Simply because it's what we're used to. That's the only reason. But when you really start questioning this, say, is that the way I have to assume life is? I know everybody does, but does that make it true? It doesn't necessarily. It ain't necessarily so. And so then as you question this basic assumption that underlies our culture, you find you get a new kind of common sense. It becomes absolutely obvious to you that you are continuous with the universe. For example, people used to believe that the people who lived in the Antipodes would fall off. And that was scary. But then when somebody sailed around the world, and we all got used to it, and now we travel around in jet planes and everything, we have no problem about feeling that the Earth is globular. None whatever. We got used to it. Well, in a few years, it will be a matter of common sense to very many people that they're one with the universe. It'll be so simple. And then maybe, if that happens, we shall be in a position to handle our technology with more sense. With love instead of with hate for our environment. In this universe, there is one great energy, and we have no name for it. People have tried various names for it, like God, like Brahman, like Tao. But in the West, the word God has got so many funny associations attached to it that most of us are bored with it. When people say God the Father Almighty,